So that's sort of the idea behind that. So the recommendation would be to change the standards from the MXD3 zone to the MXD2 zone. And to rezone that entire area that's located where the MXD3 zone is indicated. I think probably that whole entire area should be MXD3. And then what was the?
Sorry, which area?
It's now walking to one zone of
It's
MXD3.
the triangular area.
Okay,
and I can amend the map to reflect that condition. For that
I mean, that should be done.
And I don't know if we would also like to include, there's a lot of discussion tonight about COA. And maybe we actually include a clause that reflects the current ordinance in terms of any off-site housing would have to be approved by the mayor and council. The site would have to be approved.
Just to reference that.
Yeah.
An internal reference.
Just to be very clear, so there's no ambiguity.
Right.
I know that it does exist, but it can't hurt to put it back in as well. I don't know if the board has any inclination towards any material usage or certain types of requirements. One of the residents brought up having sort of a light area building, not a massive structure. So I don't know if there's any inclination towards any of that. That's something that I may be able to formulate. I don't know what it feels about that.
Any discussion?
I can't even hear her.
Yeah, a couple of comments. As far as COA is concerned, I'm in support of that suggestion just made to include a clarification paragraph. But if what I read in the newspaper within the past week, I think it was maybe two, no more than two, COA is, as you mentioned, in a tremendous state of flux. As far as I know, this board has always adhered to the more conservative approach to COA to provide as many COA housing units as the original COA regulations demanded. So I'm not sure if the whole thing is a moot point at this moment. If whatever regulations we may put into this master plan could be a moot point, because the whole process is in such a state of flux from the state.
As Catherine said during her presentation, that once we know exactly what the municipal and developer obligations are, I'm sure the municipal council will undertake a new ordinance to comply.
Yeah, I'm sure they would. So should it be included at all?
Well, I still think going forward that it should still be included. The understanding that I have is that we can't require like 20% set aside. If we meet the intent of the Fair Housing Act, and under obviously this New Jersey statute, which was taken verbatim, the financial incentive phrase, that whole paragraph was taken verbatim. So going forward, I think that we do need to include it so that we still meet the intent of the Fair Housing Act. And then at such time that those rules are finally revised, we will revise our ordinance as such. And I'm sure that that will not take very long for the borough to do. Because I think everyone on every board in the council is very, very well aware of the implications of affordable housing.
On another issue, some good points were made, particularly by Katie Jones, in my opinion. This board is considering a master plan based upon a mostly developed borough. there is very little open space left for development. We have to deal with what already exists and some very small instances of new development. So prior boards, I mean, going back a decade and going back even more than that, one could say has essentially brought us to this point in time right now. They made the best decisions they felt at the time. Not all of them were good. I am very confident that this board does the best that they could do with what's before them each and every single time. With that said, Little Edgewater, and this is to address this woman from North Bergen, and also the comments made regarding Fort Lake. Little Edgewater is right in the middle of a humongous development project in Fort Lee. And by the way, just as an aside, I went to 5 out of 6 of the open sessions that they had in Fort Lee, just to beg them to consider traffic flow and the impact on Edgewater. I was the only one there.
I was there.
Nobody else was there.
Not true.
I was there.
With that said, each town considers their own development, their own traffic flow, and to hell with everybody else, except this town. This town has spent the time looking at, for example, the I-Park development and try to satisfy the people in North Bergen in terms of the density of the buildings and the traffic flow and the views, the views from the homes in North Bergen. We have taken a lot of time to do that in the past, which, by the way, is more consideration than we have gotten from North Bergen, because the traffic south of Edgewater is ridiculous. It's just crazy. Never mind the traffic north to the bridge. Edgewater is in between the George Washington Bridge and the Lincoln Tunnel. There is nothing we could do about that. There is a lot of traffic. We have put in a ferry to try to remove the traffic. We have demanded that there be no parking so as not to increase traffic into Edgewater. But other communities have not given us the same courtesy. So, in my opinion, this master plan represents the best of what we can do with what we have to deal with. And I thank you very much for your very comprehensive and intensive approach to it. I thank the rest of the board for their attention to detail. And we'll do the best we can. One comment, one suggestion that I have with reference to what Ms. Jones said in terms of going forward. We have experienced 3 ridiculously major storms in the past 3 years. Nobody predicted it. Nobody was prepared for it. In terms of the type of land development use along the waterfront. So I am suggesting that the mayor and council and the planner and the engineer consider a conversation with the Army Corps of Engineers, because we really should be proactive in protecting our property, in protecting our town. We cannot afford to have the Hudson River on its way up to Undercliff. I live right on the Hudson River. I'm knocking wood. My house is still standing. I'm not kidding. Nothing else is around it. The walkway is destroyed, the clubhouse is destroyed. The point is that we can't say, okay, it'll never happen. There should be a proactive approach through the appropriate governmental agencies whereby this town protects its waterfront and the taxpayers who live therein or thereon. That's all I have to say.
Anybody else have any comments? Linda?
I would just like to comment as a resident, as part of this board, that it does concern me about the any kind of further overdevelopment that we have here in town. And I think that, you know, some of these things here are not perfectly worded so that the developer can't at the last minute decide to put up a 20, 30 or 40 story high-rise. I think, you know, I just don't understand about the variances here personally. You know, they go before a board, or is the public aware of the variances that the developers are granted when they are granted? You know, I mean, for example, where I live, there's a developer who is building next door, and it has been the bane of my existence ever since he started. Horrible. And I mean, you know, I don't understand how he got a 34-foot curb cut in front of his house when none of us on the street were notified by any board. I know that we didn't approve it on this board, but how does a developer have the right to get, you know, a variance for something like that, or a variance for a very high roof, when none of us on the street were advised about it?
I don't believe he needed variance.
Yes, he did. He did, because he applied, it was for addition, maybe, well, I mean, for the curb cut, how come I have to have a variance? And I would have to apply to the zoning board for a 9-foot or a 7-foot or a 5-foot variance when he got 34 feet, and now there's no parking in front of that house, and there's no parking on the street.
But that's what the whole north end of the whole town's been dealing with.
But that's not an answer, though. It's not an answer. How did he get that, though? And none of the people on the street were advised. This is why it just scares me when it comes to this 220-foot sliding scale of building coverage and building height. Building height might be increased by 1 story per 10 foot for each percentage decrease in building coverage. So, like they said, could be 30 or 40 stories high. I mean, that would just be unbelievable. I mean, I don't know if it was very clear to me how all these things work. I just don't understand the variances and how they're given without the public knowing. So I'm not in favor of this.
Who else? Anthony? Emma?
No, because we talked about this.
I mean, I think a lot of just the public in general, for years we're at these meetings and there's only a handful of people, you know, so it's 11,000 people we're now at the meetings, and yes, Mary, you're here at many of the meetings, Valerie, and a handful of people. The Asian lady was at a lot of them, I don't remember her name. She's
Peggy Wong, yes.
Peggy was at a lot of them, but a community of 11,000 people, maybe five people or so come regularly to meetings. I mean, perhaps it's just the nature of society the way it is right now. And whatnot.
Maybe
But I
we're
think
just sadistic.
we try to learn from what was done in the past and do the right thing going forward. I think in today's environment, and Catherine, you've educated me on a lot of things, planning wise and design building. I'm not an architect, you know, and whatnot, and the way things are built. Avalon would not be done hopefully today if it came before us, but, you know, we're dealing with what it is and taking what was in the past and learning from it to do things hopefully a little bit better in the future. It's not going to be perfect, but I'll continue speaking my piece on board where I have opportunity to have buildings being built better than, you know, than maybe the zone is asking for in cases, and keep pushing for changes to the zoning to continue on that. But I don't think the master plan doesn't necessarily change the individual zoning requirements of a building per se, that it has to be 5 feet above ground level and things of that nature.
Just everyone come in group very quickly.
You're allowing 40 stories ultimately.
But it's not saying how tall it is off the ground. Flooding and things of that nature.
You're leaving it open. You have no setbacks.
Oh.
It's a lot more units, it's a lot more people, no matter how you look at it. 220, that's high.
I just want to clarify exactly what the process is this evening. There is a proposed ordinance that was introduced by the municipal council pursuant to municipal land use law, the municipal council has an obligation to transmit it to this board for review, and this board is now been asked to make any recommendations to the municipal council as to what it wants to change or what it agrees with.
To change that height.
Okay, so far, as I understand it, based on some discussions, there's been a recommendation to change the setback in MXD3 to mirror or to match MXD2. There's going to be a recommendation to rezone an area that is currently MXD2, I believe, to MXD3. And there's been a question about whether or not they want to have a statement regarding the use of certain types of materials above a certain height in the R5. That was never determined whether or not that is something the planning board would like to recommend to the municipal council. And lastly, there's going to be just a recommendation that there be a cross-reference to the COA reference in the existing ordinance. Are there any other issues that need to be presented in a report?
Captain, protecting the shoreline.
Let him come in for variance.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean by protecting the shoreline. I think that's a building code issue.
I don't think so.
I mean,
I don't think so. I think that protecting the shoreline by putting in some kind of retaining wall along the entire length of Edgewater would protect against flooding.
There's battery pulls.
What?
that's something that's in this jurisdiction. The jurisdiction of this discussion.
Catherine, can you please explain the R5? How
Sliding
sliding
scale.
scale? How sliding scale? Can you explain to the board? I know you explained it about 2 months ago.
The sliding scale is to allow a developer to come in and build a taller building with greater setbacks. So right now we have
So if it's
established.
20, it would be here. When it goes to 25, it would be like that?
Right, so the greater the storage, the narrower the building.
I understand what you're saying.
But, well, the assumption is that a taller building blocks more views, and after a certain height, it doesn't block any more views. It actually, the views will increase because the views will only go up to the sky at that particular point. But it will open up the views from side to side.
I think they're talking about the density, the number of families that would then be permitted to come in. I think they're
But
talking
the
about
density
an
doesn't
increase in
change. The
population.
density doesn't change the height.
It's like this.
Just for a visual, I ride along, if I'm going into the office I work out of, I ride along 57th Street, Manhattan. You know the building that the crane toppled on?
Yeah, I know the building.
That has a very narrow frontage, but it's very tall. I also pass a building on Broadway between 99th and 100th Street, where a theater was. It's on the east side of Broadway. We're also very narrow and very, very high. Those are somewhat eyesores. I don't know that I would like to see a building of a height like that in Edgewater. I mean, even though you're talking about the views and stuff like that, still, visually to me, it doesn't look like it would be something that would be attractive.
The difference is the buildings you're identifying are not, they don't have any setbacks surrounding them. They're
They're at the curb.
Right, they're at the curb and they're side to side, adjacent to other buildings. So, in terms of that, so when you're talking about as eyesores, that relatively compared to whatever's next to them, they're much, much taller. Here you would actually have green space, and then you would have a taller building.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but
Not necessarily green space. Green space is.
And the taller it is, the more setbacks, the more green space around the building that would be required.
change it.
And also considering that what
What
spaces are left in town to build on.
that wouldn't see with
Pretty much based on the setback rules, you're not gonna probably go over 7 stories on any of the lots that are left. Unless somebody took over the commons and built one structure. That sort of thing. And with seriously, there's nothing of any significance left.
I think when you
But
first brought that up to this board, that was
Just
one of
just a
the.
little clarification also, it's not within our power to set code though for building design or material or height from the ground and things of that nature. That's all in building code.
Well, in terms of visually, we can't like dictate an architectural style.
But we have.
Well.
We have, sure. The TJ Maxx owns it, Home Goods. We set rules on what we wanted to look, the exterior to look like.
You have a home good?
We're gonna have home goods.
Well, that's what I can't do.
Well, first of all, there's a difference between a zoning ordinance and an actual application where you're allowed to take the aesthetics into concern. And what you're speaking about was a planning board application.
Right.
This is a zoning board, and under zoning, you can't dictate it has to be built X, Y, Z way, but you can suggest that certain materials are approved materials.
You can say, 20% of the building has to be brick, 70% has to be finished,
Right, because that creates a cohesive appearance.
You can sort of,
Well, I just wanted to define what is within our scope.
that is within your purview, because that helps to create an architectural style. And if you're like, in this instance, if you're looking to lighten up the building, obviously, you'd rather keep something like, like the brick base, more of a glass top, so that it didn't seem as heavy in the sky as well. It did seem a little bit lighter, and it may have a better aesthetic impact than a building that was, entirely concrete and just, punched out, but like.
Well, I'm even less concerned about the aesthetic because that's very subjective, as well. But I'm just more thinking of, things like the waterfront requiring certain things to accommodate and preserve and promote the waterfront and things of that nature within our scope. Or building, the first level of the building can't be, has to be 20 feet above sea level, whatever that sea level is.
Yeah, that's like outside of purview.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Okay.
building code issue. That's building code issue.
It's gonna be a building code issue, and if DEP changes their regulations, then obviously any developer on the waterfront is gonna have to abide by that too, because they have to approve these developments as well. Is there one?
Yeah, there's gonna be CAFR permits and waterfront development permits, and I'm sure there'll be significant work done in
And if they change that significantly, it may impact our zoning, and we might have to come back and take a look, but right now, we just don't know. So we're gonna have to see what happens. I mean, this whole process had been started before the storm. So, I mean, two issues that we'll probably discuss in the future will be that and the code issue going forward.
So, well,
We have to put it together.
let's just make sure, I just want to make sure that I have the thrust of what the board's intent is. And as I have it written down, if I could just have a moment, please, is that, one, we need to remove block 89, lot 8 as a recommendation. Another recommendation is the cross-reference with regards to the existing code ordinance. Another recommendation would be to rezone the particular area MXD3, and that also that we change the setbacks in MXD3 to match MXD2, at least the front yard setbacks. I think
Well,
those.
I don't know if that also included the side yard setbacks, because the side yard setback is not, as I explained, the fluid pedestrian environment.
Right.
I don't know if, the board felt that the side yard setback should also match the MXD zone.
Yeah, that was unclear to me. I know the conversation was in the context of front yard setbacks.
I think that actually the context was, well, it was probably front yard, but also I think it was also side yard.
So was it front that side?
Front, side, or back?
Well, the rear yards exists. That still does exist.
Okay, so it's front and side. So, I guess I'd ask for, but it's not a formal resolution, but I just ask for votes to make sure that this is the full of the board, and then we can issue a report that the chairman can sign and be transmitted to the council for their review, and that would be done probably within the next day or two. So I ask for a motion, anyone?
I'll make it.
Second?
I'll second
Motion made by Harris Barnes, seconded by Harold Green. Henry, vote please.
Okay, Ms. Foreman,
Yes.
Mrs. Farrell,
No, I'm at a height restriction.
okay, Mrs. Kelly.
Ditto?
Ditto is, you had to say.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have their,
No, I agree with
didn't
her
put
about
the
the height
height
restriction.
Okay, so that's a no.
No, we'll just say, you have to say yes or no.
No.
Mr. Philby,
Yes.
Councilman Bartolomeo,
Yes.
Mayor Delaney,
Yes.
Mr. Levine,
Yes.
and Chairman O'Connor.
Yes.
The motion is carried. I will prepare the report in accordance with the board's instructions for review and signature by the chairman, and then it will be then transmitted to the municipal council well in advance of their second reading of the ordinance, which at that point they will consider the
Which is next
recommendation.
month.
Open to the public, any other than this application? Valerie?
She doesn't come back for it.
Valerie Bordinez,
Okay, we got it.
I forgot.
We got it.
16 Hudson Terrace, Edgewater. How come I was the only one told 5 minutes?
If you took it that way, I want to apologize. What I was saying is, I think we were very liberal. I want to be liberal. We have been numerous times in the past. When you came up, I was saying, if the question was asked already, we'll say it's been answered, let's move on to something else. That's why.
That's what they weren't on.
I'm sorry?
We also know that you.
No, but you didn't inject to anybody else with, well, you already talked for 14 minutes and you didn't ask no question. I thought that was totally inappropriate. That wasn't within your purview. Anyway, that's not really why I want to stand up now. Ms. Boardman discussed Fort Lee, the planning board meetings. They had a joint planning board of adjustment meetings there. I did attend those meetings. In fact, Mayor, I text you with pictures and all. Where are you? Was I think my questions. I did go there, and when I talked about Edgewater having, this massive project in Fort Lee, and yes, what's going on in North Bergen, I don't see it as, well, we should do whatever we want because they didn't consider us. In fact, if you went to the Fort Lee Planning Board meeting, as I did, and Ms. Hogan and Mr. Gallagher did, they did consider Edgewater. In fact, they blame Edgewater for their traffic. They blame them
Yes, they do.
consistently. We were the #1 topic there on both boards. It was because of us, because we built all this stuff, we have no infrastructure, and we were causing them headaches. So they did consider us. They just didn't care. And quite frankly, I can't go to those boards for them to look after my family and my way of life here in Edgewater. I come here, I come to the meetings, I come to every meeting. I don't come to every planning board meeting because you don't seem to have too many of them and too many applications before them. I come because I care, because I love my town, and regardless of what some of you may believe, I don't come and speak out to annoy you. That may be what happens, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I care, and I get abused for it by many of the board members. I get abused from elected officials, but I don't care because I'm going to continue coming here and continue speaking out because every decision you make comes out of mine and other homeowners' pockets. And Mr. Falome, you talked about how these meetings, how few people come, and that's and And you see that with everything, you know, when you have church meetings, very few people get involved, school meetings, nobody shows up at the PTO. And I think it's very systemic in this town because we are such a transient town. We are over 52% rental. And what happens is people come in here, they move in, they're a young family, they have one child, they stay. As soon as they have the second child, they leave. You can look at the grades in the schools. The lower grades are full. As soon as it starts getting the 4th and 5th grade and they start having more children, they leave Edgewater. And so the residents like myself and many members of this board who are here for the long haul, we care. And your decisions, you know, affect us. Now, I agree with Ms. Farrell and Ms. Kelly. I applaud them. You seem to have totally ignored their suggestion, and you went off on this other tangent about materials used. I don't know whether that was on purpose. It did seem like that back here, because nobody discussed what they were saying. You did. When you build something, you increase the density. If there's an open space and you put something there, by virtue of putting something there, you increase the density. And there was this whole discussion of, well, almost everything is built. Well, that's not true. You have 115, you have the Superfund site, you have the golf range, you have the storage facility. They're all very easily, storage facility and the golf range. Wouldn't take much to put developments there. You have the area where Jimmy Gotthold uses for his equipment. That's all empty. There's plenty of open space and plenty of room to do a lot more damage in way of our quality of life. And I really wish you had discussed that a little more. Mr. Levine, you talked about you didn't like the way those high-rise look. You voted for this. You should have said, no, let's cap it. Cap it. It's not necessary. It's not just the height you increased. You increase the density. And when you talked about Mr. Flomi, you said, well, you know, we don't want another Breland. When you have a 0 setback, that's exactly what you have. So now you went to 15 feet. How much more? Have a good night.
Yes, Mary?
Mary Hogan, 606 Underwood Avenue. I know we're not supposed to discuss on what we just talked about, but when you increase the height of the building, you don't necessarily increase your green space because your impervious coverage remains. It doesn't mean you have to put green there. It just means you have bigger areas for your parking lot or whatever. But I wanted to talk about what Ms. Borman talked about, because although we don't always agree on things, I have talked many times and I agree with her. We have to get a hold of the Army Corps of Engineers to address the river. I don't think it's just Edgewater. I think all along our side of the river, we have to do that. I think they have to go back to dredging the river. They have to make the channel deeper, which will move the silt back down further, move the channel closer to the center instead of closer to the north. And anything you want to do that, count me in, and I would be very happy to work on it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else in the public wish to be heard? Yes?
I agree that the height of the building should be capped because instead of 20-story building, we could have 40-story tower. So that should be considered. I think a traffic study should be done for such a huge increase in density. And I would like Ms. Gregory to provide street addresses for the lots that do not exist on the tax map. Mainly lot number, block 86, lot 19, 8811, 9043, 9045, 932, and 942. All these lots do not exist on the tax map. I have no idea where they are. There are no street addresses provided in her report. Is that something that the public should be entitled to know? Because now these lots are shown on the map either. It's a broad map, but doesn't show that this is the lot 88.2. So I think it's misleading to the public.
Anybody else in the public wish to be heard? Yes, sir?
I would like to say.
Your name, please.
Nana Frikovic, 8040 Church Road. I would like to say about the character of the building as far as what kind of material do you use. I think for us that live over there, it's very important. Maybe not for you because you don't live over there. So when I look at the river, I'm going to see a massive structure or I'm gonna see a light structure that reflects the light. I'm not telling the developer what kind of building to build, the shape of the building, but the light structure that would reflect the light, and you wouldn't have to look into something really big. Now, the other question is, when we look at this lot that is on the river, close to, adjacent to this lot, that's approximately 15-acre property. That's about 600,000 square feet. 55% of 600,000 is 300,000 square feet. So the floor layout of the building would be 300,000 square feet if it was single structure. So definitely this is going to be re-subdivided. There will be more than one building. There will be several buildings. If they all become massive, big building, or we cannot dictate them, whatever it is, you will not see a river from any place. So I would really like it to be considered to put in the ordinance and say, yes, those buildings that will be built above the 4th level or whatever should be glass structures so they reflect the light and they don't really diminish the light. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie?
Katie Jones. Yeah, I'm just curious, so over the summer, the county came in to the community center, and they had a big map, and they asked people to write things down as to suggestions, and it ran from Fort Lee all the way down to North Bergen, and North Bergen now has bike lanes, and we don't have that. I rode my bike around all during the storm, at the aftermath of the storm, and got all around town, and there's no place to ride your bicycle, and it's pretty dangerous, but it was nice because there was hardly any traffic. But, that's something, I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but you should take into consideration. Just because North Bergen doesn't consider us or Fort Lee doesn't consider us doesn't mean we have, two wrongs don't make a right. We have to start working with everyone along the coastline because we're not a small town anymore. We can't just operate like it's just us and it's just them. We're no longer a small town, and the same thing goes with our relationship to Manhattan, and it ties in with the storms and the shoreline, and you should sit down with the Army Corps of Engineers because we're not, we're overdeveloped and we've gone beyond our means now. We have to start, pulling in and thinking bigger in terms of we are no longer that small town. Not thinking bigger in terms of we need to keep building, but we need to be more smart about what we do. Anyway, just that's something, Jim, you're a mayor of a bigger town now. It's not, you're not a small town mayor. You have to coordinate, and we have to, these buildings, I don't know what they're going to be or how they're going to end up or what the deal is, but height should be an issue in terms of the coming storms, and you really should look into all of that. I don't know if that's in your purview. I don't know if that's in your expertise or whatever, but if something happens and we have all this clumped up in one end of town and these buildings aren't built properly and they can't withstand, that was just category 1 we went through. Next one could be category 2. Things are changing all over the world. I had a friend of mine from the EPA the other day in my kitchen explaining the whole Gulf Stream. Things are changing, so that's something you have to look into, whether you want to or not. You can laugh. You can laugh, and regardless of how it's happening, whether it's man-made or not, it's happening. The ice caps are melting, pressure's coming down, and the Gulf Stream is changing, and that's why we're getting more intense storms where we are. So that's something you have to take into consideration. And also, if we are going to build a business district out of that end of town, why are we going to start giving out liquor licenses? Quite frankly, I don't know who wants to live in this town because there's no place to walk around and have a drink or, go from, there's no center, there's no community. There's nothing central. You got something over here, you got something over there. We have the Edgewater Commons with, we used to have the rag shop. Now we have Michael's, we have a shoe store. You got the most gorgeous skyline in the world. You got the backs of retail stores facing them. And no one has, we should have little cafes and liquor licenses, and people should be able to walk along the walkway and stop and have an espresso with an amaretto. And if you're gonna have an interesting community, get it going. Make it attractive. You know what I'm saying?
You can't even get a lemonade when you're walking along the walkway. It's ridiculous. It's got no character, it's got no flair, it's got no style. You got retail shops and you got big buildings. What does it take to get some liquor licenses? When I was a kid, there was a bar on every corner. Not that that was a great thing, but I mean, you should have you should have some sort of, there should be some sort of downtown bustling area where you want young people to come into town, you want people to spend their money here, you want to create some kind of a different demographic, you want more upscale. I think you should consider that.
Thank you very much.
Is there a population requirement?
Yeah, liquor license, we don't handle that.
No, no, no.
But I get there per point. When you get to a certain population, you can then ask for. I don't think
15,000.
we're at that number. So, no.
15,000
15,000.
for a package good.
But I don't think anybody disagrees with you. I would say not only a nice little place for a cappuccino and, espresso with Sambuca, little ice cream stand, and hot dogs.
That would be nice. Hot dogs.
Hot dogs. I walk that river walk every day. I'll stop for hot dogs.
Close to hot dog diet, but we don't.
That's a shame. Okay.
The cart that.
Close to public. Any other further discussion? Motion? Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Everybody, we'll see you on December 18th. Thank you very much.